Prime Minister Trudeau says he had an excellent conversation with President-elect Trump during that dinner on Friday. Comes, of course, after the threat of tariffs on goods and services from Canada and Mexico. The dinner took place at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's Florida estate. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc was also there. Sources tell CBC News, though, there was no guarantee the tariffs were coming off the table. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers is warning about the potential consequences of those tariffs. Summers served as Treasury Secretary in the Clinton administration from 1999 to 2001. He was also the director of the National Economic Council under former President Barack Obama. In a Canadian exclusive, I asked him what Trump's proposed tariffs could mean for the U.S. and Canadian economies. Larry Summers, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Obviously, in this country, a lot of focus this week on President-elect Trump threatening to impose a 25% tariff on products from Canada and Mexico unless, he says, they curb the flow of illegal migrants and drugs. What do you make of this threat from the president-elect?
It seems an awfully odd negotiating strategy to me, especially vis-a-vis Canada. I had not been aware that we had a major issue with migrants coming in illegally from Canada. I can't imagine that on issues relating to fentanyl, your government wouldn't be willing to cooperate with ours to the maximum extent possible. So I was surprised by the frontal and hostile nature of the approach that our president was pursuing. I do think our president-elect was pursuing. I do think that our president-elect is, it appears, someone who's very attentive to markets and to not wanting financial markets to react badly to actions that are taken. And I suspect if he carries on in a trade war kind of mode, he will be taking substantial risks vis-a-vis financial markets, and that may exert some discipline and some limitations on the policy instincts that he has and that some in his administration have. It seems to me that hundreds of years of economic science and, more importantly, economic experience suggests that for major power strong economies to launch global trade wars is a very poor economic strategy.
Well, let's assume that it's the beginning of a negotiating tactic, as you said. What impact would a tariff of that magnitude have on either economy, the U.S. or Canadian economy, do you think?
Look, I think the more tariffs we impose in the United States, the more inflation we will have. And the lesson of the last election is that voters really hate the higher prices that come with inflation. And so I think this is something of a stop or we'll shoot ourselves in the foot kind of economic strategy. I will leave to others to judge the impact on the Canadian economy, but it can't possibly be good. It can't be good for Canada as an original source of goods exported to the United States. It can't be good for Canada as a producer that takes in imports, processes them, and then produces final products. I suspect the end result will be a substantial scrambling of trade flows globally and a less efficient global economy.
So let's
I do hope.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do hope that Canada will cooperate with the United States in responding to what are very real problems in China, very real problems around what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, very real problems in the Middle East. Yeah. And I think that Canada does derive enormous benefits from its relationship with the United States. And I think it's appropriate for Americans to have some expectation of solidarity with Canada on key security priorities. But that is not in any way to justify this particular threat and bluster.
Do you think, though, that the bluster, when we're talking about Canada at least, has anything to do with perhaps, I think you're alluding to, our defense spending, which has not yet met the NATO target of 2%? Do you think that it is all part and parcel of things that Canada needs to be showing the president-elect that it is committed to?
I don't think Canada, it's not for me to speak to what Canada should do.
Sure.
I think the legitimate element in much of what President Trump says is an expectation of allies carrying their fair share in all the complicated geopolitical spheres that we have to deal with. And applying pressure on them to do that seems to me to be part of responsible American leadership. Some of the tactics that are used in this, some of the criterion that are set for what constitutes reasonable leadership, all of that, I think, is a very legitimate question.
I do want to ask you about China, because Trump has now named his trade representative, who's called China a generational challenge. One of the things that Trump, president-elect, was apparently happy to hear when he spoke with Canada's prime minister was that we had also put in place tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and parts. Do you think that what Trump is talking about is needed in terms of his response to China and trying to sort of control how much power they have?
I think one has to take a very holistic view of this, and I find it difficult to comment intelligently on specific measures outside of a context.
Okay.
In general, I think the right posture is one of drawing limits, very real limits, around any signs of Chinese expansionism, including with respect to Taiwan. I think it's very important for us to recognize that Chinese military spending has been rising more rapidly than ours for a long time, and that has created tensions that we need to address. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think it would be a short-sighted and dangerous strategy for us to seek to suppress the Chinese economy or take actions which could reasonably be seen in China as suppressing the Chinese economy, because history teaches that those kinds of actions can easily set in place quite vicious cycles.
And I'm not sure you're going to answer this because I don't think you want to give advice to Canada, but I wonder what you think the Canadian government should keep in mind given these threats this week and as it gets ready for the new Trump administration.
I would hope that Canada would stick with certain enduring values, a recognition that we have an extraordinarily important relationship, an awareness of the many ways in which Canada does depend on the United States and has benefited from United States strength and sacrifice. And at the same time, Canada has always been a voice for decency in the global system, whether it's with respect to the provision of foreign assistance, whether it's with respect to resisting tyranny, as in World War II, whether it's with respect to global public goods. And so I hope that Canada would remain committed to its alliance with the U.S., but also committed to its enduring principles.
Larry Summers, thank you for making the time, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.